All right, welcome listeners. This is going to be a really exciting event that Davon Breedlove has put on for everyone for the month of May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And this is going to be the women's panel. And I am very honored to be able to lead this discussion with four amazing panelists. And this is the mental health panel that we're going to be discussing some really good topics. And on the call with me, I have four amazing ladies that are now going to introduce themselves, and then we will move on into discussion and questions, and then we will move into wrap up with a couple of advice questions, and yeah.
So hello, my name is LaDonna Pierce. I am a licensed professional counselor as well as a certified health and wellness coach.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Lanielle Madden. I am a Scientific Health Communications and Policy Fellow with the Center for Global Health at the CDC. And the views and opinions expressed today are that of my own and do not represent the official position of the CDC. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Natalia Fuller. I also go by Dr. Canary. I am a psychiatrist as well as a sex therapist.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Monica Faulkner. I'm a neuroscientist. I work for the National Institute of Health, and I focus on drug addiction and treatments for any form of addiction. And I'm just so blessed to be among these amazing women.
Thank you, ladies, for introducing yourself. And you know what? I forgot to introduce myself. I am Brandi Slaughter. I'm a master's level student studying clinical mental health counseling at Lipscomb University. And I'm definitely excited and blessed to be here as well among all these amazing women. So now we are going to move into our question and answer portion of this show and of this panel. And we're going to start with LaDonna. And so LaDonna, your first question is, can you differentiate a therapist from a counselor?
Okay, so I feel like this can be very difficult to do, I would say, simply because when it comes to a therapist and a counselor, those two terms are used interchangeably. And I feel like it depends a lot on one's education, their background, their preference, as well as their current job and what, the current title that they hold. Counselors can usually be bachelor's levels as well as master's level individuals, whereas therapists typically, I believe, are only usually master's level clinicians. So the work looks similar, but therapists typically will dig a little deeper. But I also say that to say, like, I introduce myself all the time as either a mental health therapist, a licensed mental health therapist, or a licensed professional counselor, depending on who I'm talking to. So, it can be used interchangeably, but there are like some differences, I would say, but it's really, really hard to pretty much differentiate between the two.
Yeah, of course. Do any of you ladies have anything to kind of give some insight or feedback on with her response to that question? No? Okay. Okay. Thank you, LaDonna. We're now going to move on to Lanielle. Your first question is, what mental health related warning signs are evident in a person struggling with depression?
Sure, thank you. So a few warning signs is changes in sleep, changes in appetite, prolonged feelings of sadness, suicidal ideations, feelings of hopelessness, feeling guilty, or just a lack of interest in other activities. So those are some of the warning signs. I'd be interested to hear if anybody else has anything further.
Yeah, I will. So my line of work, what I currently do, I work with children. So I would say like something that I will add that most people really don't think about is that, usually sometimes with depression, usually I would see it in like boys, but they sometimes come off as just angry, and people feel like, oh, like, this kid's so angry, but really they're just like battling with depression and just really just don't know how to like fully express that or be able to, explain that to other people. So it comes out in anger.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Lanielle, if I could quickly chime into that, I'm not sure if you listed it, so if you did, I'm sorry, but one thing that I've seen through the workforce, and then also now having an internship with clientele, just that isolation period as well, where they used to be a really outgoing individual, and then now they've scaled back from that, or sometimes vice versa. They're overly engaging themselves all the time, kind of running away from their problems a lot, and just constantly want to be surrounded by people and never wanting any, space or free time or time to themselves. That's something that I've been able to notice within individuals struggling with depression. Okay, great. Moving on, Dr. Canary, your first question is, what advice can you provide a guardian who has a loved one that threatens their life or someone else's?
Yes. So people that experience any form of mental health or mental health illness or addiction problems, they're not always willing to seek help because they may not believe that there is a problem. And a lot of times they feel like they can address the issue on their own, or that they don't need treatment. And so if someone is threatening their own life or someone else's life, it could really be a multitude of things, but it sounds like, they're going through depression, or they might have bipolar disorder. So typically, a lot of family members, they're going to be tempted to repeatedly urge, plead, or even threaten the family member into seeking treatment. And unfortunately, that usually results in them having like some sort of breakdown of communication or completely shutting people out. So if you do have a loved one that is threatening their own life or your life, and a lot of times they threaten other people's lives because they need that help, and it's kind of like a plea or cry for help. So, an example, instead of saying, you need to get help, I tell them to say, I hear that you're talking about how unhappy you are in life. I feel worried. I think it would be really helpful for you to talk to someone about how you're feeling, and just kind of validate their feelings, and then talk to them about different forms of therapy, because whether it's mental illness or an addiction, they need to go speak to someone about that, whether that's a counselor, a psychologist, or they can come to me, a psychiatrist. So you want to talk to your family member about their concerns, why they feel that they want to take their life or take someone else's life, and encourage them to seek support. And then also get support for yourself and your family. That is a tough thing if you do have someone dealing with mental illness, depression, addiction. You might want to figure out what resources, community resources that are out there. And also a lot of that stress, you have to take care of yourself. So make time for activities that help you with coping with stress. And the most that you can do is really just support that family member and give them the resources. There's hotlines that you can go to. There's so many mental health therapists that you can call that have 24-hour hotlines. Take them to the nearest hospital. If they say, yes, I am interested in seeking help, take them to a hospital. Usually the ER will have some resources there. There's crisis line, even the local police department, depending on what community you're in. I'm here in Atlanta, and the town that I live in, our police department is actually trained in crisis therapy. And just letting them know, that they don't have to harm themselves. They don't have to harm other people. Call 911 if you need to.
Thank you for that awesome answer. Does anyone have anything to follow up from that or to add to her response? Okay.
Dr. Canary, you answered my number 2, so thank you.
Did you?
Sorry.
You did. You might have to just...
I'm so sorry about that.
No, that's great. That's great.
I'm reading anybody else's question.
I'm just
give
gonna...
Danielle an extra question. I think I got a backup one somewhere.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I prepared
sorry.
what I prepared for. But no, that's great. I'm just gonna tag on to what you said. So thank you.
Okay, great. That's teamwork. That's awesome teamwork right there. Okay, going back up to the second question, starting with LaDonna again. Your question is, how does a person articulate that someone has a mental health condition?
Well, so that can be a little tricky, but like general knowledge, when talking to someone, just to be able to like let them know, but out of respect of course, confidentiality. I could, if I'm going to use John for an example, I would probably just say, John is currently, going through some things that he's working through, or mentally John is having a hard time, or having some challenges that he's currently dealing with. If I'm articulating to someone who has, access to this client's information and like I have permission to talk to this client, then I want to give them a little bit more information as far as like the full scope of like what's going on as far as like warning signs, things that they can do to help, and just be able to communicate that in a way that, they will understand and be able to help whoever it is that's close to them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, moving into Lanielle's question. What resources can you provide for suicide prevention?
Yes, so thank you again, Dr. Canary, no, that's great. No, seriously, thank you. I will be happy to reiterate some of those resources. She mentioned the suicide prevention hotline, 1-800-273-TALK. Like she says, open 24 hours. It's offered in multiple languages, as well as texting TALK to 741-741. Obviously, seeking a licensed professional to talk to, as well as some of the obvious that are right here in front of us, obviously calling 911 for an emergency, your local healthcare provider, urgent care, and so forth. But there are also some resources that I did not know. So I did a little homework. And so the Trevor Project for our LGBTQ community that provides services for mental health, as well as the Trans Lifeline, also a nonprofit that provides services for our trans community. As well as, I didn't know, I'm also in this world of technology right now, especially during COVID. I was looking for some apps. I do the Calm app and other meditation. So I didn't know if anybody was familiar with Shine, a Black-owned app for meditation. It provides inspirational messages and forums. So if anybody has any more, I'd be happy to hear.
Yeah, I use Liberate. That's Black owned and operated too. I think it's Black woman owned. Don't quote me, but I enjoy that for meditation purposes.
And you guys are giving me new resources that I wasn't even aware of. Are these new apps? And if we also can get a little insight on kind of like a review, how you guys feel about the app so far, and maybe, what are kind of some of the benefits or the highlights that potential users could gain from that app?
So I can speak from the Calm app. Unfortunately, one of the barriers is that it costs. So I wish that it was free, but I just find it wasn't really let me just take a moment to breathe. But it has helped me. It has helped me in just a moment of stillness, like deep breaths when I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling really worried. I have battled with anxiety, it seems like all of my life, if I'm being completely transparent on this call. So I'm just breathing. So it has helped me, honestly.
Yeah, I love the Liberate app. I started meditating more during the pandemic because it was very hard for me to distinguish or like make space for personal life and home life. And I started having issues with anxiety, but also just sleep disturbances. And I could not quiet my mind. So, and one thing that I'm very aware of is I need a certain type of voice, right? When I meditate, my affirmations, they have to sound like myself, right? They have to sound realistic, and like I have to identify with them culturally. So the Liberate app has mostly Black practitioners, African American practitioners. It has where you can go through and you can look for spirituality, things for COVID, different things like that. But again, as you said before, there is a paywall, so you get a certain amount of free content. And then if you would like to have more access to different things, you have to pay for those. So that's something to consider as well. But I think it's a great resource for people that are just starting out.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing about those apps and those resources, because I just learned. So I'm sure that anybody that's going to be tuning into this series probably definitely were able to write down and gain some new resources, which is important for anybody, especially during this time that we're in. Even though it seems like we're kind of heading to the light and the hope of the pandemic, still it's here, right? And we're facing all kind of other things. But thank you, Dr. Faulkner. Thank you. All right, we are on Dr. Canary. In what ways have you seen trauma lead to a mental illness?
So that's a very complex question, but to give you like a short answer, so trauma and stress are known to cause changes in what we call like a stress response in your immune system. So like people that are dealing with depression and anxiety, a lot of times their doctor will tell them, let's try and keep your stress levels down or your anxiety down, because that does make you prone to having an inflammatory response. So people that are typically dealing with a lot of trauma, it is going to affect them internally as well as externally. So a lot of times, trauma and stress related disorders can be PTSD, which is post traumatic stress disorder. You have ASD, which is acute stress disorder. You have adjustment disorders. You have reactive attachment disorders, and the list goes on and on. So there is a delayed response to trauma, and then it can cause fatigue, sleep disorder, nightmares, fear of reoccurrence, anxiety, flashbacks, depression, avoidance of emotions, excuse me. So trauma can definitely lead to mental illness. And that's why, all of us were in that space of working with individuals that have had some sort of trauma. And that's why it's so important that we tell individuals, we've all had some sort of life trauma. And it's so important to actually face whatever trauma that you've had, because it is gonna keep coming up, and it is gonna reoccur, and it's not something that you can sleep away or drink your problems away. You do have to face it and seek help.
Spot on.
Yeah, Dr. Canary, I want to add to that. And so, from the research perspective, I do most of my research in what we call translational. So, looking at basic science concepts and translating that into potentially treatments, or us better understanding different concepts. And so, one of the scales that we use quite often in addiction and depression research is the childhood trauma questionnaire. And by and large, it's one of the greatest predictors of treatment outcomes. So, whether someone is going to stay in treatment and be successful in treatment. And treatment can, mean many different things. What successful treatment means. Maybe that means someone is drinking less. Maybe that means that someone is not smoking as much marijuana, or is not touching those substances or touching cocaine ever again. Maybe that means they're not doing self-harm behaviors, they're not cutting or things like that. So it just depends. But I think Dr. Canary touched on it. It does have the ability to change things developmentally. And when we say change, that doesn't mean necessarily that those are bad, right? Those are things that are going to mean that there's something wrong with your brain, or it may be just an adaptation, like your genetics, epigenetic changes, or things like that, small changes over time. So trauma is very important. But what we know is that if we can address that, and start talking about those things and kind of hit those issues head on, we can make better strides in the long term from a treatment perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Faulkner and Dr. Canary. Awesome responses. And just if I could add in, or more so ask anyone, on the panel, when it comes to trauma, because you're right, I'm not sure who said it, whether it's Dr. Canary or Dr. Faulkner, everybody has trauma. But a question that kind of came up for me, or that I may be seeing as I'm doing my internship, is what about those that maybe are kind of oblivious to their trauma, or if the trauma is being noticed by another person? How do you think that maybe that should be confronted? Because that can be kind of triggering, like, I don't have problems, I'm fine, I'm okay. People can get a little defensive, whether it's from an outside source or whether they're even unsure within themselves. So how do you think that can maybe be handled when it comes to trauma awareness? That can be answered by anyone. I'm sorry.
I'll jump in and kind of give my little input, but because that's a really actually good question. So when you were asking, I was like, man, like I was trying to think if I've ever actually ran into a situation like that, and I probably would say that I have. So like I said, I just deal with kids, and like I have like some kids that they just won't recognize it, or they don't want to acknowledge that something has happened, whether it was like within their family or something just within themselves. So I really kind of just leave it there. And I really can't like necessarily push trauma on them. I may talk to them and just really just deal with the symptoms that they're having, and just kind of like helping them cope with where they're at, instead of just like, oh no, you have PTSD, this is what's going on and this is why. Like I kind of just wait for them to kind of acknowledge and be able to come around to understanding, like, okay, well, this is probably why I respond to this way, is because, oh, this happened to me. And sometimes honestly, like that can take a while for them to really just be able to recognize it. And I feel like a lot of the times, like when it comes to a person who has been through a traumatic experience, or having some signs and symptoms of PTSD, it's really like a joint or a family approach. Like it's not just necessarily like that individual. Sometimes it's just involving like different people, whether it's their psychiatrist, a PCP, a family member, just everybody kind of like approaching it as one united front or one team to be able to help this client.
Thanks, LaDonna. I appreciate your response. I was just curious, because trauma, just everybody feels so different and takes it in different, right? Whether they're aware of it or not. So thank you. But okay, following up with question number 2, Dr. Faulkner, you're up. What can be done to encourage people to talk about mental illness more?
And so I love this question. Thank you so much. And I hope the rest of my panelists jump in, because you all are like on the forefront, actually talking with patients and working with patients. I do most of my work is from a research perspective, but what we try to do is encourage people, starting from NIDA and IAAA, but National Institute of Mental Health, is we're trying to break down stigma, right? So being able to name something, but also having advocates and allies, and putting yourself in a community where you can start to learn how to use your own language and find your own voice in your own story, right? So if you are someone who suffers from depression, if you are someone who suffers from panic attacks, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to disclose that information, but you may tell someone, start to learn, oh, I didn't feel well today. I feel, I am having some intense feelings. I'm going to remove myself from this particular situation. And then as you start to learn how you would like to share your story, share parts of yourself, that helps. But also having a community. So whether that's your mental health professionals, your family members. And so I think what we can start encouraging more people to do is talking about it within their community, within their family, sharing those things and learning what that means and how they feel when they actually give words, right? Or give a voice to what their mental health situation is in that moment. And that gives you your power to tell your story. So we have to do 2 things: help people find their voice, but we also, from our perspective, help decrease the stigma associated with having a mental health issue or mental health diagnoses.
Absolutely. I agree. Everything you said is spot on. And I think because we're all in that therapy space, whether it's research or actually having patients, I think not only enlightening our patients, but making sure, I know at least in my practice, I try and speak to the parents and encourage them to speak to the younger kids, because this is really something that we should be teaching in elementary school. Because by the age of 10 to 12, you have kids that have already been through severe trauma. They're experiencing depression. As we all know, the suicide rate amongst adolescents has skyrocketed. And even in the Black community now, the numbers are starting to double. So, allowing your child to express themselves, to teach young men that it's okay to cry, that it's okay to have feelings, And little by little, I think we'll start to chip away at the stereotypes and the stigma that surrounded around mental illness. And especially in our Black community, I know a lot of us have family members. When I became a psychiatrist, my family was like, is that even a real doctor? Like, you didn't want to do anything else. But they didn't realize. I was like, well, I see all the issues that our family has, and I thought that we could start there. So it's just really important to start, with our community and our patients, and making sure, and our younger adolescents and teenagers, and just speaking to whoever we know. And it really starts with us. That is a part of our job, is to enlighten people.
I love that. So, and I will just add in, like, one thing that I usually like to, actually, I do this with my friends. Sometimes, if we're on the phone, but, I also encourage it sometimes to the family. So, if you're just sitting around just eating lunch, or eating dinner, at the table, just asking the family, like, what are your highs and lows? And then everybody goes around the table and just, you start with your low first, and then you end with your high, as far as, like, what happened, for the day. So, my low would be, I got a F on my test, but my high was I was able to see all of my friends after COVID, at the playground, and then just having, like, everybody just go around, the table, and just being able to, like, express that, and then so the parents allowing the kids to be able to express that, but also, the parents being able to know what's going on with their child, like, during the day, because they could be battling with things that they don't even know how to communicate to their parents.
I love that. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I love that, expressing your highs and lows. And to all of your points, I think, like many of you said, is just having that community and that base of support. In the Black community, our faith-based organizations have been the pillar of the Black community for the longest. And I think one of the ways to combat stigma is having that conversation in the church, so I can get my Jesus in my therapy. That's okay. So, I think it's still having those discussions, sharing our stories. I think that's all part of it.
The last thing in talking with some of my research participants and people that come into the clinic, I always say it's okay to not be okay. So one thing that I've done in my life, but I encourage other people to do as well, is, when someone say, hey, how you doing today? Be honest. Like, that's the first step. It's a small thing, but you would be so surprised how much effort sometimes it takes to say, oh, well, I'm not doing so good today. I'm a little stressed today. I'm feeling off, or something like that. So instead of the default being, oh, I'm good, I'm well, and you, which is, was my default. So I'm fine, and you, I'm well, and you. You shouldn't have asked, because I'm gonna tell you how I feel. Okay, so if you ain't ready for the answer, don't ask Dr. Monica Faulkner in the hallway.
I love all the answers. Oh, somebody gonna go?
No, I was just gonna say, I love her response, because I think we do have the tendency, I know at least myself, when people ask, how are you? I just give them the bare minimum, like, oh, yeah, I'm doing good. But deep down, I'm thinking I could use a massage. I could use a glass of wine. I could use a lot of different things right now. You don't really want to give them that full response, but I think we should practice that. I definitely think, I love that idea, Dr. Faulkner. I think that's a really good idea, is really expressing how we are doing.
And just to add in, after all of you ladies, it's not a simple answer, but it's an important answer, is normalizing talking about mental illness and mental health. I think that these past few years, it's coming more to the surface, being talked about. Celebrities are doing it. They're sharing their stories, right? And I know that gains a lot of people's attention, but it doesn't just stop there. It's with conversations just like these, which for me personally, it kind of inspired my mental health podcast. I put actual guests on there like yourself, whether they're in the mental health field or not, or just regular people, males, talking about, I really need a space for the, you know, with my woman, where I can feel like I can cry safely and not be judged and not be torn down. Having people share their trauma, and we have to normalize it by talking about it. We keep sweeping under the rug. Our ancestors have been doing that since the end of time because they weren't getting that education. They weren't getting that knowledge. And it's okay because they just didn't have it at that time. But we can't keep saying, you know, what happens in this house stays in this house. It's not okay anymore. Kids are going to school having to hold on to these secrets and hold on to these broodings and all these bruisings and trauma, and aren't able to tell anybody because they're afraid if I share, my mom and dad might get mad, you know, or something like that. So just conversations just like these that I hope continuously happen after individuals see this, like, you know what, this is important and we have to talk about it. So yeah, that's great. I love all that. It's giving me good vibes. But okay, going up to the third question, LaDonna, you are up again. Your last question is, what advice would you give a teacher about interacting with students who have a mental illness?
So when interacting with a teacher, that is typically individualized for that specific student. But, you know, my focus being in the school setting is to make sure I'm focusing on the well-being of the child. And with that, I mean, like, if their mental health diagnosis is impacting their ability to learn in the classroom, then at that point, I feel like it's important to really let, you know, the teachers and the staff, you know, or give them some skills to be able to help them prepare the student for success. So for example, like if there's a student with like ADHD, you know, just really, you know, maybe allowing the teacher to have that student pass out things in the classroom, or just get the child moving. So that way, you know, that child's not, you know, moving on its own and getting in trouble. If there's a student with anxiety or depression, just, you know, coaching that teacher on, you know, being able to talk to the student or prompting the student to utilize those coping skills, you know, in the classroom, or understanding the warning signs that they may see of a student that may not be in control of their behaviors or their emotions at that point. So I feel like a lot of teachers actually are, you know, reaching out and wanting assistance when it comes to things like this, especially like wanting to know the correct verbiage to use when talking to, you know, students, because this can be very, I guess, you know, touchy sometimes, and they just really want to make sure that they're prepared.
Yeah, I love that example you gave with the ADHD, sorry, student that you gave, and having the teacher just incorporate them in the process. I've been in that position and I could see where I could have done better knowing kind of something was there, and that could be really helpful. So I think that was a really good example of being able to give the teacher advice, but also being able to help the student in the process of that all.
Yeah, usually we'll have like student specific meetings where, you know, we'll pretty much grab the whole team, and, you know, everybody will come up with a plan, and each teacher will get a copy of that plan. And, you know, if a student is having, you know, specific issues, just really just referring back to the plan to make sure that we're doing, you know, everything on the plan to be able to help the student, because the student's usually involved in that meeting as well. And, you know, letting us all know like what do they need to be able to be successful in the classroom, or what do they need from us to be able to help them in those moments.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, LaDonna. All right, Lanielle, for your last question. How can a person monitor their mental health?
Thanks. So I'd say being self-aware. Um, I feel like I'm really good at being self-aware when something is seeming like too much, and when I need to take a pause, take a break, take a beat. To Dr. Faulkner's point, I think I need to step away from this situation. But if for those that are not self-aware, just have trouble being self-aware, you can also keep a daily log or journal about your emotions or what's going on, so that you're able to recollect, like, I was feeling this way when this happened. Of practicing mindfulness. And I think it was also Dr. Faulkner that noted identifying stressors in the things that get us to a certain point, and addressing those individually. Finding those self-support groups, obviously self-care in a healthy fruitful way. And I always say, know when to fill yourself up when you're feeling depleted. I say, you can't pour from an empty cup. So let me let me make sure I'm full before I'm able to pour into you. So those are some of the tips that I would give.
I love the cup scenario. I know it sounds simple, but it really is meaningful and it's important. You can't give to others and you're not being self-aware and giving to yourself. Absolutely. Thank you, Lanyo.
I wanted to chime in that I think it's really important that when people are in the process of getting or in treatment for mental health disorders or any type of mental illness, that it's okay to monitor, because I think sometimes people think that they don't, oh, if I'm journaling, like you said, I have in my planner, it has like highs and lows. So all of these things that we're touching on just from a professional setting, like what did you achieve today? What was a struggle for you? And so it's nothing wrong with checking in with yourself. And that may not happen as you progress in treatment. You may not have to do that as much, right? So in some situations when we're doing studies, we do moment to moment analyses or quality of life or things like that, where we'll have someone do a questionnaire every day or a couple of times a day. But as they get closer to ending treatment, they may just be doing it. It's more than just baseline stuff, right? So it's like, okay, well, you do it once a month or twice a month or something like that. So I think it's okay to, if just starting something, yeah, you might have to check in with yourself every day, a couple times a day. But and then I think there's an accomplishment or a feeling of pride once you are able to self-monitor without having to do some of those same techniques. So it allows you to do it, but it also allows you to see your progress.
Thank you for adding that, Dr. Faulkner. I think we were, I knew I was gonna forget my spot. Dr. Canary, there we go.
Yes.
Last question. Are symptoms associated with schizophrenia, such as hearing and seeing things all in a person's head?
So first, I just want to explain what schizophrenia is for those individuals that don't know, that aren't aware. So schizophrenia is a mental disorder in which people interpret reality abnormally. So they might see things that aren't there, might hear things that aren't there. So it's a combination of hallucinations, delusions, extremely disordered thinking and behavior. It's particularly the individuals that you might see. Sometimes a lot of homeless people, you'll be driving down the street and you'll see them talking to themselves. Most likely they probably have schizophrenia. So the exact cause of schizophrenia is actually unknown. A lot of scientists believe that it's a combination of genetics, environment, altered brain chemistry, and structure could play a role in it. So for us, it does seem it's abnormal because a lot of us don't walk around talking to ourselves, answering ourselves out loud. But for them, this is a regular reality. Delusions for them are real. And so they have a different perception of reality than we do. So a lot of times I'm just very careful as to what I tell them is real and unreal, just because that is their reality. They really feel like they're hearing and seeing these things. And of course, a lot of times we can't hear or see them. But when they're having those delusions, hallucinations, they have a lot of disorganized thinking or speech, abnormal motor behavior. For them, that is the reality that they live in. And they feel like, this is what's really happening. And so to tell them, hey, I cannot see butterflies flying around my office. A lot of times it can make them get very aggressive. So a lot of times I'll just ask them different questions like, okay, well, you're saying you see butterflies. Where are they flying at? Tell me about the butterflies. And then we have to put them on medication. Typically, most schizophrenics are on some sort of medication, monitoring, and there's different levels of schizophrenia. Like some are fully functioning. I have some patients that have jobs, full-time jobs at that, and they can function in society. And then I have some patients that, they're pretty much at the psych ward all the time because they cannot function. And you have some schizophrenics that know what they're seeing and hearing is unreal. And they'll tell you, like, I realized that my grandmother that passed away 10 years ago cannot possibly be sitting right next to me. And that's another part that kind of goes into stigma where, you know, of course, people want to call them crazy and stuff like that, but we just don't live in their reality. So a lot of times we just have to find ways to assist them while not encouraging, I guess, the behavior, but also letting them know, like, we understand this is what you're going through. How can we assist in this manner without saying, oh, you're just crazy, and you know, butterflies can't possibly be in this room right now, and different things like that, but just really encouraging them and saying, you know, I understand you're probably very confused that there aren't any butterflies and that you can see it, but I can't see it.
Thank you, Dr. Canary. I'm really glad that you added that second part to the question about how to assist those with schizophrenia, because I'm sure anybody that's going to view this series, whether they have that themselves and they're diagnosed with that or know somebody else with that diagnosis, because that can be frustrating for the other person too around that individual who has schizophrenia. But I think that was really important that you kind of gave a few tips on just how to assist them and how to kind of, you know, handle them instead of just going right and saying there's nobody standing right there, because of course for them that is their reality, and that's just important to for that moment to understand that that's what they're seeing and to respect it, even though we really know there's no old woman standing right here. So yeah, so thank you. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? Okay. Dr. Faulkner, for your last question, in what ways have you experienced a person's culture or religion or some aspect of their background influence how they may think about mental health?
Oh, yes. I again love this question. And please, the rest of my panelists chime in as well, because I think we all have seen this in our interactions with patients and participants. And so, culture and religion is really paramount to how someone's going to perceive treatment, also perceive you in many ways. So, from the addiction perspective, one of the most common and popular forms is the 12-step program. A lot of people don't know a 12-step program is spiritually based. It's a religious based program. The first step is to acknowledge God, right? So of course, if we have participants or clients that are not believers of a creation or God, that's not going to work for them, right? So we can't encourage them to be into that space, because it would also do a disservice to that safe space for the people who do have that same type of belief system and are getting something from that treatment. So culture and religion show up all the time, just whether how we design studies and just the different types of treatment. But then from an individual perspective as well, and I always think about, I'm a Black woman, I see lots of Black people coming in and out of the clinic. We have to respect the family structure, right? Family structure, the church structure, that plays a role into everything. A lot of times, if I'm doing a study where participants have to come in and be inpatient, we have to figure out how we can still have them get daycare, or they have to care for their mother, or if there's a baby shower or a church anniversary, they don't want to miss those types of things. And it's not fair for us to say, well, you have to stay in the clinic for 4 weeks until, you know, you just can't leave. Okay, well, that's not going to work for their culture. There are other obligations that they have to have if they're stable, of course, and it's safe for them to leave. So all of that really does play a role. And I think we're getting to a place where there are more physicians and more physician scientists that are aware of that, and trying to, from my perspective, trying to give physician scientists and clinicians and people on the front lines better therapies, better interventions, where they can respect people's culture and their backgrounds and their religions, so we can incorporate those. And from a neuroscience perspective, when you look at someone that has cultural and, well, so religious and like meditation and things like that, you will see different neural patterns. And like this is, I'm talking about brain chemistry. There are different things that happen when you have someone that meditates on a regular basis and how they deal with stress and anxiety, right? As someone who is a person of faith, so the beliefs in whether it be whatever God they believe, and then you have them exposed to different types of reward processing. Their behavior is different from what we call controls, people that don't have those same same cultural or religious like backgrounds. So I think we would be remiss if we didn't start incorporating that more in the way we look at treatment and the way we conceptualize treatment for mental health.
Thank you for your response. Amazing. Does anybody, any of the panelists have anything to add or have any experience on their own in the field with these particular influences, spirituality or religions? Okay, I think I have a small addition. Dr. Faulkner, not too much. I just took a course in spirituality and religion, and it's more so just to say what I learned, which was a lot. It definitely expanded my ways of thinking and how to even pursue my clients moving forward. And just knowing that to some, it really is important, but it's important to them for these kind of reasons. And that could be from A to Z. Just the study of it behind and linked to mental health was really interesting to see that. I never kind of, viewed it like that until you're kind of looking at the research or looking at articles and things like that that talk about these kind of influences.
Yeah, so one of my from a personal perspective, I think while I was in graduate school, I had a therapist through UNC Chapel Hill, and he was an older white man that practiced like Native American spirituality, but he was very aware that I was a Christian, and he just always circled back and asked me, well, how does your faith play a role in this? He would edify me and say, I think that it's so good that you are increasing your prayer time because I know that's so important for you and it seems to be helping you. I hear it coming more out in some of the things that you're saying. So just from a personal perspective, for me, it was really important that I had a counselor or a therapist that was able to acknowledge that and that it was important to me, even if they didn't have the same faith background.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, it seems like we blew through those questions all so fast, but I just appreciate everyone participating and engaging on everybody's question. But before we move into wrap up, I did want to ask each of you if you all could share just with it being, Mental Health Awareness Month, and then just moving forward, because how I see it, mental health is a continuous marathon. It does not stop whether May comes and when it goes. But what is a piece of advice or just a source of encouragement maybe that you have that you want to leave with the listeners and the audience that are going to view this documentary series?
Well, I would say honestly, like just from hearing from, the ladies, just to piggyback off of them, a key thing would be just to not be afraid to pretty much to talk about it, in any setting. And honestly, like I feel like just from experience, it really just starts at home. So really just being able to, have those conversations with family members or, the people that, are close to you and really, trusting them and just, being there for them if they need it as well. But yeah, just not being afraid to talk about it.
Agreed. I think somebody on the panel said it's okay to not be okay. Especially, I will reiterate, especially during these crazy, crazy times of the pandemic and civil unrest. I mean, I don't know about you ladies, but I have definitely had periods of I am not okay. I am not okay. And that's okay. That's okay. Let me take a beat. Let me take a second and regroup. And I have been able to rely on professionals and my faith to keep me going. So just to Ladonna's point, just talking about it and yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
I absolutely agree. And just learning, especially as women, I think we take on so many different roles. We're mothers, we're daughters, we, have to care for our boyfriends and our husbands. And so really just saying that it's okay to take time for yourself and your self-care. I'm so big into self-care. I preach this to my patients. getting massages, taking walks, keeping active, exercise, finding things that you like, and thinking outside the box, because sometimes exercise is not for everyone. So if you like to get massages, get massages. If you can't afford massages, have your partner give you a massage. Because a lot of my patients, they'll be like, oh, well, I can't afford this, I can't afford that. Do it for yourself. Give yourself a mani and pedicure. That's a great way of self-care. If you can't afford a massage, get your partner to give you a massage. And then that's a great way of intimacy, because I'm a sex therapist as well, so I got to bring that intimacy in. Eating well, really taking care of your body is so essential, because you will feel better if you eat good, making sure you're drinking your water, getting your fruits and vegetables, and then asking for help. I know a lot of people, they go see a therapist, they try one time, they're like, oh, I tried it, I hate therapy. Every therapist is not going to be a perfect therapist, because we're human beings as well. So if one therapist doesn't work out, please do not be scared to seek another therapist, because we all come from different walks of life, different religions, different cultural backgrounds. So just because one therapist isn't giving you what you need does not mean that you can't find what you need from a different therapist. So don't be scared to therapist hop. Don't do it too much, but don't be scared to, just kind of see what's out there and ask us questions. I always tell my patients, ask me questions, or my clients, ask me questions, get to know me, because maybe I'm not a good fit for you, but there is someone else out there. Maybe I can find someone else for you. So at the end of the day, we all need to take time out for ourselves. And at the end of the day, to be a strong person, you have to take care of your mental health.
Awesome points. And I would just say that when we think of mental health or mental health disorder or something, or illness, sometimes we kind of think of the extremes, but I like to always remind people that mental health is a spectrum. So some days you're going to be better and functioning at a high level. Some days you may function at a low level. And depression can manifest itself in many different ways, right? So you can have someone that can't get up, or you can out of the bed, or you can just be, oh, I'm exhausted all the time, or I'm just can't stop working, I can't stop moving. So being aware of yourself and knowing that it may manifest itself in different aspects or different levels of severity in your life, and that there is treatment and there is ways that you can address all of those different levels. So you don't have to wait until it gets too bad. You can start seeing a therapist now if you just need to check in with someone, right? If you just want to talk to someone about your spouse or your boss or things like that, it's okay. I think it's really, really important that we understand that self-care should include regular therapy visits, counseling sessions. I'm an advocate for that. It does not matter where you are on the mental health spectrum. I think all of us can benefit from building those relationships. It's just like a PCP, just like you go to get a physical every year. You should have someone that can address your mental health and emotional health that you trust, and you can kind of check in with them, even if everything is going good, at least one time a year.
I love that again. Thank you everybody for sharing. I think for mine, it's probably going to piggyback off of everyone's, but it's okay. And I think it's important and good to have many different resources that feed you differently. Your therapists feed you mentally and even spiritually, if they specialize in that particular spirituality or religion. That self-care aspect, that feeds your inner self, and it gives yourself love, and you need self-love. You need that, the mani and pedi or the massage from your partner if you can't afford one, or taking yourself out to lunch. I'm big on that. I don't miss a meal. I don't believe in going cheap for food. I like a good savory, wholesome meal. I get my vegetables too for the doctors, but I think that's really important. Getting yourself fed spiritually. If you like going to church, or you go to a mosque or just whatever it may be, it's okay to have different things and different people for different reasons that feed you. And I think that's gonna allow you to be healthy in the best way. And definitely Dr. Faulkner, for people to understand, I've put that on the podcast. Your PCP, if you go to them and talk to them about things, you can do that with a therapist. And sometimes you can get in a little more in depth, because sometimes your PCP doesn't have all that kind of time to talk about all that you really are wanting to talk about. So just understanding that it's okay to not be okay, and that it will be better and you will feel better when you start to do better and act on those things that you know you need. So that's my little token of encouragement. So I thank you, Dr. Canary, Dr. Faulkner, Lanielle, and LaDonna for just being a part of this series. And even myself, I'm sure we're all, grateful to Davon for just piecing this together and bringing us all together. I know all of you all inspired me, and just being able to talk with you all and sit on this panel with you all was amazing. It makes me want to dream higher and bigger. So I thank you, everyone, for just being able to give your time, your insights, and your expertise just on some of these really important topic and questions, as we continue the marathon of mental health.
And thank you as well, because this was all amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.